1.2 million students drop out of high school every year. And of those 1.2, less than 3% are of Asian descent. Well, I have the distinct honor of being the first ever high school dropout in my family. Yeah, my dad didn't applaud then either. So he said, Phil, this story will become basically a cautionary tale of woe to all the little children in South Korea who misbehave. He said, here's North Korea, and here's you. You're right there. I thought, oh my goodness. So 1.2, 2.9. Well, I know that there are other high school dropouts in my small community. But what makes this story so compelling, I think, is because just the sheer unlikeliness of this happening. You see, I grew up in the northern suburbs of Philadelphia, a two-parent household. It was a good school system, one older sister, no drug or alcohol abuse, a relatively easy childhood. And I was planning on going to an Ivy League school, just like my older sister. And as a first-generation Korean American, I was either going to be a doctor or a doctor. I had every opportunity to succeed and completely just flubbed it away. So my talk this morning is really about rethinking or reframing the way we look at failure and why I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Now, I want you to think about the arc of your career. Everyone fails, right? If you think about it, your career is a bunch of ups and downs across the way. Nobody makes it through life error-free. And if you've learned any skill, any instrument, or any sport, you've learned through failure. It was through trial and error. Basically, you are making it up as you go. You've learned and you've relearned. No matter what your parents have told you, you were bad at something at one point. I remember my first job. It was for a CPA and consulting firm. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to hear that. It was for a CPA and consulting firm, and I was on a client prospecting meeting. It was me, my managing partner, and the client CEO. And my goal at this point was to not say anything stupid. So it's supposed to be a shadow, don't say anything. Unfortunately, there was a lull in the conversation, and the CEO turns to me, and he says, well, do you have any thoughts or questions? And without much thought, I blurted out, do you hunt? And just to give you an idea, the backside of his office actually did look like this. It was decked out with various levels of mounted deer and animals that he had killed. He even had a camouflaged frame wedding photo. So he looks at me as if I'm being ironic, and I wasn't. I didn't have anything else to say. And then I say, well, did you catch one? That's what I asked him. Did you catch one? So some of you are chuckling because you know that people don't catch deer, right? You shoot them, you kill them, you maim them. You don't catch them. So it was basically a wreck for the rest of the afternoon. I didn't know what to say. I shut it down. The good news is, later on, 2 weeks later, we did get the engagement with that client, but forever, from that point on, I was the deer catching guy with him. So now, I was thinking about, so as we were going through, as I was progressing through my career, I was having these ups and downs. I pursued all the relevant certifications. I got some promotions. I even won some awards. But as I was progressing through, I felt a sense of just not fitting in. Like something was just not right. I could do the job fine, but I never quite felt at home. Have you ever felt that? So I went back to grad school, and I started taking evening classes, and I was able to teach adjunct at various universities, and I fell in love with teaching. I finally found my groove. So here I was, full circle, from high school dropout to college professor. And I used to look at my past failures with a sense of awkwardness and shame, like I wouldn't tell anybody about this. But now I see it as a sort of badge of honor. I was going from failure to failure, but I was learning some key lessons along the way, things like resilience, humility, and how to work within my skill set. So my question this morning is, what if we fundamentally changed the way we look at failure? Rather than trying to gloss over or hide or even ignore our failures and mistakes. What if we saw them as stepping stones to a better perspective? Most of you are probably familiar with the company 3M, and if you've used Scotch tape or Scotch Guard or purchased Post-it notes, you are actually a customer of 3M. But what most don't realize is they have over 20,000 different products and services in the commercial and consumer realm. 20,000. And here is a quote from William McKnight, one of their longtime CEOs. "Mistakes will be made, but if a person is essentially right, the mistakes he or she makes are not as serious in the long run as the mistakes management will make if they tell people exactly how to do their jobs." You see, 3M allows their people to make mistakes. They even encourage it. The CEO has been noted as saying, "We seek to increase our failure rate by 10% each year." What CEO says that? We seek to increase 10%, stepping stones to a better perspective. Now let me ask you here, just by show of hands, who here doesn't love bubble wrap? Doesn't? Okay. Security, remove that person right over there. Okay. Yeah, bubble wrap, it's incredible. Well, did you know that bubble wrap was actually invented for interior home design? Did you guys know this? It was meant to be textured wallpaper. I know, what? That would be so distracting. I would just be over at my friend's house wanting to randomly high-five the walls, just to pop the bubble paper. Well, so that flopped. Then they rebranded it the next year as insulation material for your home and for your office. Again, it went nowhere. Third year, they finally rebranded it as, actually IBM first used it as packaging material for its servers during delivery, and it took off. Now, Sealed Air Corporation is worth over $9 billion and has been in business in the bubble wrap business for over 50 years. Let me repeat that just in case you missed it. There's a company that makes bubble wrap, is worth over $9 billion and has been in business for over 50 years. Now, I believe that these multi-billion-dollar companies, the reason why they're so successful is they encourage their people, their employees, to make mistakes and learn from them. We've got to change the way we look at failure. See, the truth is, we as a culture are consumed with this idea of winning, and winning at all costs. Aren't we? It's all about the numbers. Who has the best quarterly numbers? Who sold the most units? Who has the most points? Who has the most championship rings? But I don't think deep down inside people are moved by numbers and statistics. They're moved by stories. And you know what's better than a great number story? A great comeback story. I want to introduce you to Dale Hartz. He's the one on the right. He's got the sunglasses. He started a nonprofit that supports, develops, and trains the homeless to start their own businesses. And on the left is Frank Wilkinson. And in 2015, Frank was a broken man. His fiancée had died unexpectedly and tragically. He had lost all his money. He was basically going through a really, really rough time. And then he met Dale. And in Dale, he met somebody that finally believed in him. So he coached him for an entire year. And there were some setbacks and challenges, but Frank stuck with it. And a year later, 18 months later, Frank is now the proud owner and operator of Pro Help and More, a commercial cleaning and construction business. And I want to ask, who here isn't rooting for this guy, right? I mean, he's gone through so much, severe depression, struggling with alcoholism, all of these things, and here he is starting his own business because somebody believed in him, somebody gave him a second chance. The last point is we all have constraints. I read one time that Gary Larson, is anybody familiar with Gary Larson and his work? Far Side Comics? Okay. Well, Gary Larson, he actually had to change the way he drew his cartoons. You see, the popular comic strips of the time had 3 panels in which they could deliver the punchline, whereas Gary had to be proficient with one. So here were his constraints. He wasn't that great of an artist. He would be the first to admit that. Secondly, he had to fit all of his art into one panel where everybody got 3 shots at it. So he had to learn things like patterns and dimensions and perspectives. He also had to use an economy of words to get the story basically in 1 or 2 sentences. The audience fell in love with it, though. He has sold over 45 million copies of his books and his collections. He's one of the most prolific cartoonists of all time. I told you the story about Frank Wilkinson. I did want to end with this, with a note from Maddie Wilkinson. After the story had been published, this is what she writes. "Thank you so much for publishing this article. This is my father, Frank Wilkinson. I have not seen him in 2 years. I didn't know whether he was alive or dead. And since this story has come out, I have reconnected with him, and I am so happy to have him back in my life. I've been looking for him for what seemed like forever. Thank you so much for reuniting my family and I back with our dad." I guess in my experience and in Frank's, the message I want to share is it doesn't matter how far you've fallen. Today is an opportunity to get back up. Everyone deserves a second chance. I told you the deer catching story, well, most of it. Here's the rest of the story. My boss and I were driving back that afternoon, and I was pretty much crushed. I didn't know how to recover from it, and he knew I was down. So he said, he said 3 things. He said, "Phil, number 1, don't dwell on it. Number 2, be yourself. We hired you for a reason, and it wasn't for your deer hunting skills. And number 3, get ready, because we have a busy day tomorrow." So let me translate that for us today. Number 1, don't dwell on your past mistakes. Everyone learns through failure. Number 2, be yourself. Everyone has constraints. Number 3, if you've fallen, it's time to get back up. Everyone deserves a second chance, and it's time to start living yours. Thank you. Thank you.